Daring Rose being led up now, and this looks like it, and he's away. He's jumped off all right. And in fact, making the early running. Daring Rose from Rich D and Celtic Isle and Foxbury and Woodford Prince. They're going very steady in the early stages. Then Prominent King. And just in behind them, Irish Gantlet and Dexter Light and Yellow Brass. The back marker at the moment is Candos. As they come to the first of the 13 flight, it's Daring Rose from Rich D in the sheepskin noseband. Then Celtic Isle and Fort Belvedere and Foxbury. And Woodford Prince. Satyr Freak and Dexter Light and Irish Gantlet and Yellow Brass and Silver Tycoon and Prominent King, Castle Haven, and finally Candos. Candos racing rather unwillingly at the moment, and as they race uphill, it's Daring Rose in the lead from Rich D, Fort Belvedere, Satyr Freak and Celtic Isle and Foxbury and Woodford Prince. Behind them come Dexter Light and then Irish Gantlet and Candos on the inside. He made up, lost ground in the early stages. Then Silver Tycoon and Prominent King and Yellow Brass, and finally Castle Haven. Going very steadily down this hill, with Satyr Freak going up to dispute the lead now with Daring Rose. Rich D is in third, 4 is Fort Belvedere, 5 Celtic Isle, then Foxbury, Candos, Woodford Prince, behind them Irish Gantlet, and then Dexter Light and Silver Tycoon and Yellow Brass and Castle Haven and Prominent King. Running down to the third in this bright sunlight here at Cheltenham. Daring Rose on the right of the picture, on the inside that is, Satyr Freak wide of him towards the outer. Between horses is Celtic Isle. Then comes Woodford Prince and Candos and Rich D. Just behind them Fort Belvedere and Foxbury. Celtic Isle now from Satyr Freak and Daring Rose and Rich D in fourth. Fort Belvedere 5. 6, 7 and 8 are Woodford Prince, Candos and Foxbury. Then comes Dexter Light and Irish Gantlet. Behind them Yellow Brass and Silver Tycoon and Prominent King, and finally Castle Haven. Coming to the fourth, Celtic Isle in the lead from Satyr Freak, Daring Rose and Rich D and Candos and Woodford Prince and Fort Belvedere. Then Foxbury and Silver Tycoon and Irish Gantlet. Then Dexter Light. The back marker is Castle Haven. Running downhill, and Celtic Isle in the lead from Daring Rose and Satyr Freak and Rich D and then Candos. Then Woodford Prince and Fort Belvedere and Foxbury, and behind Foxbury is Silver Tycoon with Irish Gantlet, Prominent King, Yellow Brass, Dexter Light and Castle Haven. Over the fifth, Celtic Isle lands in the lead from Rich D, and then Daring Rose on the outer, on the far side is Woodford Prince. Coming down to the sixth of the 13 flights, Celtic Isle from Rich D, Satyr Freak and Woodford Prince. Not a lot between that quartet, with Daring Rose very close to them, and then Candos. Behind Candos is Fort Belvedere, and then Prominent King and Irish Gantlet. Dexter Light on the inner, Yellow Brass, and Castle Haven the back marker. So coming to the flight, it'll be the last on the next circuit. This time it's number 7, Celtic Isle from Rich D, Daring Rose, Woodford Prince, Fort Belvedere, Dexter Light, Candos, Satyr Freak, Irish Gantlet, Foxbury, Silver Tycoon, Yellow Brass, Prominent King, and Castle Haven. But quite closely grouped. Rich D in the sheepskin noseband just on the outside of Celtic Isle, taking a fractional lead now. Daring Rose is third, Woodford Prince 4 and 5, Lord Belvedere. Candos comes next with Foxbury and then Irish Gantlet, then Dexter Light and then Silver Tycoon and Prominent King and Yellow Brass, and Satyr Freak, who's lost quite a bit of ground, and the grey Castle Haven. So running downhill on this final circuit to flight number 8. It's Rich D for the north in the lead fractionally from Celtic Isle, then Fort Belvedere and Woodford Prince and Daring Rose, and then Dexter Light, Foxbury, Silver Tycoon taking closer order, Prominent King, Yellow Brass, and finally Castle Haven. Coming to the 9th, Colin Hawkins on Rich D. Just in the lead from Woodford Prince on the outside. Daring Rose very close to them. Celtic Isle on the inner and Fort Belvedere next. Then Silver Tycoon, who's taking closer order. Candos has pulled up. So right over the far side. And it's Rich D. Just in the lead from Celtic Isle. Woodford Prince and Daring Rose. Very close in behind them. Dexter Light and Prominent King making ground with Yellow Brass also. 4 from home this is. Rich D lands in the lead from Celtic Isle, fighting his way back to the picture. Woodford Prince going up on the outside. Racing to the top of the hill now. Rich D, Woodford Prince. Very little between these two as they begin the run downhill. Prominent King is right up with them too, and Silver Tycoon coming there with a good run. Only just in behind them is Daring Rose. They're running down now towards the third last, and Irish Gantlet coming there very strongly too. And it's Rich D, Irish Gantlet, Woodford Prince, Silver Tycoon and Prominent King as they come down to the third last. Rich D lands just in the lead, and Woodford Prince has gone there. Woodford Prince is a faller at that one, and it's Rich D from Silver Tycoon, Daring Rose, Prominent King on the outside, Celtic Isle. Coming to the second last now. Rich D in the sheepskin noseband from Silver Tycoon, Prominent King, Daring Rose and Celtic Isle. Rich D landed just in the lead there from Silver Tycoon, Daring Rose, racing round the home turn now to face up to the final flight. Daring Rose, Celtic Isle, Prominent King and Rich D. These 4 ahead of Silver Tycoon as they come down to the final flight. Daring Rose coming there with a great run on the stand side. Over on the far side is Celtic Isle, and Daring Rose is going to land in the lead. Daring Rose lands in the lead there from Celtic Isle, then Rich D and then Prominent King. And John Frankham now racing away to complete a notable double here. It's Daring Rose producing a sprint as he races up towards the line. You'd think this was top of the ground conditions. He's sprinting away to win the Waterford Crystal Stairs hurdle. At the line, Daring Rose wins it very comfortably indeed. Plugging away, game leader to be second is Celtic Isle. Prominent King just holds third place ahead of Fort Belvedere, and these are followed by Castlehaven and Rich D and Silver Tycoon, and then Yellow Brass and Dexter Light. And so the result of the Waterford Crystal Stairs hurdle: first, number 4, Daring Rose, owned by Mr. P.D. Saville, trained by Fred Winter, written by John Frankham. Second was number